Hello everyone, my name is Rosie Gibson. I'm from the Sleep Wake Research Centre at Massey University, where I do some research to do with sleep and particularly focus on sleep and healthy ageing. Um, and just before the COVID lockdown, was working with Age Concern Wellington, where we were doing some presentations around the region about sleep changes with ageing and optimising sleep and so on, which were going quite well, quite popular. But unfortunately, with the Covid-19 and associated lockdown, the last one or two of these was cancelled, and we thought it would be nice to do something similar online. So I thought just having a little chat about some of the key points we covered in that presentation might be useful, but also reflecting on what the level 4 lockdown has meant for many of us, for our sleep, and maybe some special sleep tips there. And so I won't give a full presentation today, I'll just talk to the camera, but we do have some resources on our website, particularly focused on sleep changes with COVID-19, and there is something there focused for older adults. And that's on our website, which is www.sleepwake.ac.nz. And so on there's resources, and there's also a link to a survey that we're doing about sleep at this time. So you're welcome to check that out, take part and share as well. Okay, so in general, we are seeing some sleep changes at the moment. The pandemic and all the restrictions are definitely challenging our routines and our movements. So this is increasing kind of our individual as well as societal stress, and naturally sleep is going to be affected, and we're adjusting to these new routines. We've got new things to worry about and so on. So it is not unusual to have poor sleep at this time, but we do also need to recognise that sleep's really important for our general health and well-being. It protects our immune system and also helps us to recover. So it is something that we need to try and maintain if we can. But as a rule, with aging anyway, we know that about 30% of people do report poor sleep anyway, regardless of the pandemic situation. People have insomnia, generally just or would report poor sleep. Also, there's common sleep disorders like sleep apnea and snoring and restless legs and so on, which can cause trouble, and hopefully, can be dealt with by a doctor, or you can have an assessment at the sleep lab. And also there's a whole lot of other health conditions and their medications which can affect sleep with aging. So things like cardiovascular disease, depression, cognitive impairment, or pain, arthritis, and so on. Really, everything will affect sleep, and a lot of the medications we take for those conditions will have either sedating or alerting side effects. So we need to be mindful of what time of day we take those. And also there's neurophysiological changes with aging, I'm afraid. So when we look the way kind of sleep timing works, there's two systems that help us go to sleep and stay awake at the right times of day. And so the first is really our sleep pressure, a load. So the longer of time we spend awake, the more sleepy we feel. And as the day goes on, the load or pressure to sleep increases. But we have another system working alongside that, which is our circadian alerting system. And this is all governed by an internal body clock, which is ticking just over 24 hours a day. So that helps us to keep active and alert in the daytime, and sleepy and asleep, resting at night time. And as we get older, that does become less peppy, but less robust. So we do need to kind of work to keep that entrained. And for all of us, in periods if we're very much isolated from time cues, external time cues, this can come out of phase and become disrupted. So the main way we keep that circadian body clock entrained to our 24-hour clock is through our exposures to bright light. This is really the number one thing. So we have a pathway from the eye that goes directly to the area of the brain where this body clock is in the hypothalamus. And when we're exposed to light, it ignites that area of the brain, makes it more active, and it suppresses a hormone called melatonin, which is what we use or is secreted at night time to make us feel more sleepy. So it's kind of like it comes out when we're in darkness. So the bright light kind of suppresses that and makes us feel alert. And so the time of day that we are in bright light is really important. So what we tend to recommend is bright light exposure in the morning to keep the body clock entrained and in step with the day-night cycle and our sort of social cycle. Things like physical activity are really important as well, as are the times of day we eat our food and socialise and so on. So keeping everything routine, our body and brain quite likes to be routine, and sleep falls in with that. But certainly exposure to bright light is key. And what we're seeing obviously at the moment is that's not so easy, because if we are bound to being in our homes and we don't have access to gardens perhaps, or we're less physically able to get out and exercise in natural light, or attend all our social engagements and so on, this is contributing to poorer sleep at this time. Not to mention all the routines that we might have had with our working and social lives have been kind of put on hold, and we were quite routine animals. So as soon as these come off and we're not turning the alarm clock on perhaps anymore, the whole schedules are being affected. So there's things we can do is just, like I said, being mindful of what time of day you do get light exposure in the morning. Maybe having morning tea outside or even by a bright window if possible can be really helpful. Or just being mindful to open all the curtains and things first thing in the morning, get the natural light into the home, and in the reverse, coming into the evening, actively dimming rooms, not exposing ourselves to bright light devices like phones and computers in the evening, because that will have the this similar effect at the wrong time of day, because it will be suppressing the hormone that we need to make us feel sleepy, which is the melatonin going into nighttime. And not maybe doing, if you're going to do physical exercise, again, keeping that to the morning rather than the evening, so we're not inadvertently alerting the area of the brain that kind of tells us that it's time to be awake. So I had a few people emailing. I forgot to mention at the beginning that this is incorporating some questions. So, and one thing that's very interesting with aging is that our exposure to light and the way we process it does change, and it becomes less easy with aging anyway. And a lot of this is to do with changes of the eye, like thickening of the lens of the eye, and deterioration just in the neural pathways that keep that body clock entrained. So for people who are blind or visually impaired, this is particularly a problem. And they had a couple of people email in mentioning this, that we have essentially kind of free running sleep cycle when people are visually impaired or blind, or indeed, if you put someone in a cave and they're not exposed to light at all, we see this too, because as I said, the body clock does tick just over 24 hours a day. So if you take away that exposure to light, people do start, their sleep pattern shifts, and the time of day that naturally they want to be asleep or awake doesn't align with the external world. So this can be really challenging for people who are blind and they're trying to operate in a society that obviously is still running on that 24-hour cycle, so going to work and maintaining social engagements and so on, because really they're sleeping at a time that's not in line with where their body clock is at. So essentially you're feeling kind of jet lagged, or you're trying to force yourself to sleep at the wrong time of day, which can make your sleep be unrefreshing, or you have trouble getting sleep and staying asleep, the symptoms of insomnia. The people who are blind quite often are prescribed and are having this trouble with their sleep system, will use a supplement of melatonin, that hormone, to tell the body when it's to help make it feel sleepy at the right time of day. And you may have heard of this. There are supplements that people use when they are flying, or yes, for jet lag, or having sleep problems. But this isn't necessarily something we recommend to use routinely for sleep. In New Zealand, you can't really buy it over a counter. It's something that's prescribed for people with unique situations. So people who are blind and cannot get exposure to that light, that's really key, because what we see is over half, I think, of people who are blind or visually impaired will have trouble with this because they can't get the exposure to light. So this is a nice way to supplement it. If people have poor sleep in general, it's not so much recommended, because we are still secreting naturally this hormone melatonin in the evening. And so getting the dosage right isn't easy. And if we're taking too much melatonin, this can have impacts on other cycles in our body, our hormone cycles, temperature cycles, and so on. We don't know the long-term effects, and we don't know how it works with other medications as well, for example, sleeping medications and so on. It can really muck up your sleep if you're taking too much or at the wrong time of day. I might have gone off on a bit of a tangent there, but let's have a think. So yeah, because the area of the brain associated with sleep timing does start to deteriorate, the way it messages the brain about sleep and wake also starts to deteriorate with aging in general. And so what we tend to see, and what people say in my presentations and indeed from the emails leading up to this, is that many people feel less refreshed from their sleep. They're more likely to wake up in the nighttime, and they're more likely to feel sleepy in the daytime. And this does seem to be quite normal with aging. We're not getting as much sleep. The recommended amount is sort of 7 to 8 hours, but many people are sleeping less. Some people reporting just 4 or 5 hours. And if they're functioning well on this, this is fine. Many people feel that they would like more sleep. Um, and so it is a common problem, so you're not alone. Another common thing is that people quite often have a split sleep, so they'll get 2 or 3 hours of good sleep at the beginning of the night, and then a bout of wakefulness in the middle of the night, and maybe again some more sleep leading in to the early hours of the morning. And again, this is quite normal. It can be frustrating. People say, it's frustrating being awake in the middle of the night, and you can feel irritable or emotionally affected during the day by it. But again, you're not alone. And interestingly, what we know about split sleep is that actually historically it was quite normal to sleep like this. So it's with industrialization and using bright lights and trying to maintain this condensed sleep so we can be more focused in the day and going to work and so on. We pushed to try and sleep this kind of 8 hour block overnight, but actually historically we would go to sleep at the same time the sun goes down. We'd have 3 or 4 hours sleep at the beginning of the night and possibly a few hours awake. We were doing quiet activities in the dimly lit room, obviously, because there'd been no artificial light, and then have another period of sleep before the sun comes up. So don't panic if this is what you're experiencing, and it may be worth, if you can't get back to sleep after awakening, just to do some quiet activities like reading a book rather than looking at a screen, just quietly thinking or writing, knitting, etc. But yeah, not to be too concerned that that's happening, because it is kind of a bit of how we're kind of naturally programmed, but socially we've pushed ourselves to try and sleep all in one block. So the other reason we're waking up quite often is because our sleep, we go through different stages when we're in the night. We're not just asleep or awake. So we have 4 stages of sleep, which get deeper. Stage 3 and 4 would be our deepest. So that's really slow wave, what we call slow wave sleep. And unfortunately, that's associated with kind of growing and hormones and memory. So teenagers have a lot of this, and as we get older, children and teenagers, sorry, get a lot of this. But as we get older, there's less and less. Similar with dreaming sleep, with REM sleep, that starts to become less as we get older. So instead of these deeper, kind of more restorative feeling stages of sleep, older people tend to have lighter stages of sleep. So when we wire people up in the lab, that's anecdotally what we do see is kind of lighter quality sleep. So this means that more easily woken in the nighttime. And lots of people do say, they get up and go to the toilet a lot in the nighttime. And this may be that we're just waking up more easily and thinking maybe the reason we've woken up is because there's a need to go to the toilet. But it's not always the case. It just becomes a bit of a habit. So we need to be mindful of that. Or sometimes you think, oh, you may as well, if you're just awake anyway, just go to the toilet. Ways you can maybe reduce issues getting back to sleep after hopping up to the toilet is, again, keeping in mind that bright light. So maybe just using dim night lights in the bathroom or hallway and not having to turn lights on, because as soon as we start turning lights on around the bedroom or bathrooms and so on where we are, again, that will suppress that hormone melatonin and make it more challenging to get back to sleep. Even a short burst of bright lights in the middle of the night will have that alerting effect on the body clock. So if we can keep it safe, but some night lights for doing things like that can help, but just not over stressing about trying to get back to sleep, sleeping on your time. And many older people mention that they wake a lot earlier than they did when they were younger, and so it's just being mindful of this. And if you can have some quiet time, if you're hopping up and exposing yourself to bright light, like saying going for your morning walk at 5 o'clock in the morning or whatever, then this is going to consolidate the brain waking up, because again, you're exposing yourself to bright light at that time. So if you don't want to be waking up at that time, it's best to kind of keep yourself in a dimly lit room, and then time that light exposure more like 9 or 10 o'clock. What else have people been asking? Yes, with other people talking about their health issues. So some people, sleep can become a lot worse if we're poorly, and some people mention when they go into hospital that sleep becomes a lot worse. And obviously, there's a few factors here. So whatever ailment you're inflicted with, if that's causing discomfort or pain or new medications and so on, that is going to affect your sleep. As I said earlier, most conditions will affect sleep in some way, whether it's because there's alerting or sedating issues, or there's respiratory issues or pain and so on, and just being able to get comfortable or anxiety over that condition. So there's that, but also when we're in hospital, all of these lovely time cues that we have in our home are not so routine, because hospitals are working on this 24/7 basis. So when we're being kind of woken up by other people in our space, people checking on us, bright lights, and being given medications and assessments at different times of day. So and not just simply not being able to go outside, or maybe even if we're not by a window, we know from research that if people are recovering by an area where they're getting nice bright light from a natural window source, that they recover quicker. So a trip to hospital can throw our sleep out, and it is to be expected, and it will take a while to recover. It's a bit like when we're jet lagged, and have disrupted sleep for a few days. It does take a while to recover, but also whatever illness you have, because you've been to hospital, you need to recover from that. So I think, again, taking it gently and not stressing too much about it, and maybe being mindful again of the times that we're exposing to light. So if it's just being able to sit outside in the morning with morning tea, or taking a phone call outside, or things like that, just to be able to again begin to retrain the body clock, the differences between day and night. But if we are very tired due to our health or the COVID situation, it is okay to schedule in a nap. In fact, we'd recommend having a nap kind of after lunch for 20 to 40 minutes is a really good way to combat feeling sleepy in the daytime. Because if we try and struggle on through and then we end up falling asleep unintentionally in the early evening, then that does really challenge our ability to fall back to sleep, because that's taking care of that sleep pressure that I mentioned earlier. So if we've had a bout of sleep in the early evening, then we don't have the pressure that we need to fall asleep, because we've slept quite recently. So timing a nap just after lunch or so can be really useful. When we talk about sleep, it's not just simply the duration. I think, what I've alluded to is the time of day that we're sleeping is really important, and keeping a routine is really important. With the COVID lockdown, our schedules have all changed, and so it's okay not to be sleeping at the same time of day as you were before, but whatever your new schedule is, stick to that. So it might be actually that some people are in a better schedule for you, if you don't have commitments that you need to wake up for and so on. You can afford to shift your schedule around a little bit, but whatever you are doing, it's good to try and keep a routine and stick to that, and really being mindful of not necessarily just how much sleep you're getting, but are you satisfied with how much you're getting, and how alert you're feeling in the daytime, and if you're feeling like you're functioning okay, then that's good. And if you're not spending ages awake at night, then that's fine. But also being kind on ourselves and realizing that this is common with aging anyway, and it is a particularly unique time during this lockdown period. Other tips or other changes I think I could just mention with level 4 in particular is we've got our less scheduled days. We've got our reduced opportunities for natural light and exercise and social connection. So again, this contributes to our regular sleep-wake cycle. So being mindful of what time we schedule those in. But also this is a real state of uncertainty for all of us. So lots more likely to feel anxious or worried. We're reading the news later than maybe we should do, and exposing ourselves. There's a lot of tragedy going on everywhere. So it's natural to feel more concerned about the situation, and symptoms of insomnia are definitely increasing, is what we're seeing. So people are having a lot more trouble getting to sleep and staying asleep. So putting putting the phones away, not reading the news too close to bedtime, and so on will all help. And just being mindful of how much of this we are exposing ourselves to, and keeping some mindful exercises and some relaxation exercises there, because it can cause insomnia, but it can also, people are reporting nasty dreams associated with and the changed situation, and so that can be really challenging. That's because we are that area of the brain that's responsible for our emotions, and that's really active when we're dreaming, but the area of the brain that makes logic and sense of what we are experiencing, that's kind of stays asleep when we're in dreaming. So what we experience during REM sleep is kind of a rebound of all of the emotive and visual stuff that we're seeing during the day without the kind of sensible part of our brain making taking note and being logical and trying to dumb it down. So really not exposing ourselves to too much will help, and this will die down as we adapt, I think, to the new situation as we know it. And there's lots of new social norms. So many people are reporting that they're feeling a lot more sleepy in the daytime, and actually just feelings of exhaustion. And I think it's important to recognise that this might not be related directly to poor sleep necessarily. It's actually everything is more tiring. We're having to think a lot more about the decisions we're making, even who's going to the supermarket, how's it going to get to me, what do I do when I'm there, concerns about the way our other family members are behaving, or where we are and aren't allowed to go, and what we do if we meet someone on the street, the whole new load of social norms and moral judgments that we have to make. And this is really quite exhausting on our brains. It's not something that we had to do a few months ago. So it's all a time of adapting to that, and this can make us feel exhausted, and that is okay. It's part of adapting to it. And if we do need to have a rest in the afternoon, it's okay to do that. And quite often, we try and power through on less sleep than we need and so on, but this is a time that if we can optimize sleep, it will help us to adapt and recover. And even if we're having strange dreams and so on, that is all part of our brain working through this odd situation that we're in. So protecting our sleep, protecting the routine. Also, if we've changed our schedules much and we're in a bubble with different people, or people who are at home who aren't usually at home, protecting your routine within the family. If you are an early bird or a night owl, try and make sure that the family support you to carry on being that way so you can optimize your sleep. Keeping the bedroom a sleep safe zone, so things like not working or using computers or phones in the bedroom, really prioritizing just sleep related behaviors in there, so things like reading quietly, spending time with your partner. That's really important. But also, if you've got other people in the bed or bedroom who are being disruptive, have conversations about your sleep routines, or if someone's got a sleep disorder like they're snoring, or they're very restless, how you can optimize sleeping. The bedroom, would it make more sense to sleep in different spaces, for example, or can they change different positional pillows and so on to support their snoring, so everyone can get a better sleep. We can use eye masks and so on. Avoiding alcohol and caffeine. This is something, again, with the change of routines, people do seem to be consuming caffeine and alcohol at less regular times than we maybe used to. And although caffeine can help us feel more alert during the daytime, but it takes a long time to come out of our system. So if you're drinking alcohol, coffee, or caffeinated drinks in the afternoon, they can still be having an impact later on in the evening. Even if we don't have trouble getting to sleep, this will still lighten the quality of our sleep and make it more likely fragmented in the night. So avoiding drinking too much coffee after lunchtime, or Coca-Cola or dark chocolate, all those kind of things will help. Have them in the morning. And also alcohol, that can help us to fall asleep because it does sort of naturally sedate us. But this can come back as an issue in the nighttime because it tends to suppress the REM sleep, which is the dreaming sleep. But our brain does really want that. So it will come back kind of with a vengeance at the end of the night. And that, again, makes us more likely to have more frantic dreams, or wake up or be disturbed from that time of sleep. So trying to just be mindful of when and how much we're consuming of alcohol and caffeine. There are different relaxation techniques you can try, and again, this is a personal personal preferences, but many people find having a warm drink before bed, not watching news, turning the television off, 1 or 2 hours before bed, not using the phones, and just doing quieter activities, winding down before bed. And this can include, warm baths and things will also help to promote our temperature dropping, which helps us to fall asleep. There are apps. So somebody did email asking about if there's any useful apps out there. I don't think we've got anything in New Zealand necessarily, but there's a few that you can download. There's a lot, I should say. There's a lot of stuff online and available on phones that are sleep related, but not many that have been validated by sleep scientists and kind of tested in trials and so on. So you need to be careful of which ones you're using, and especially if you're investing in. So there's a few. There's one called Shut Eye, but I think actually that might go under the name of Somnarist now, that you might be able to find online. There's one called CBTI Coach. So CBTI stands for Cognitive Behaviour Therapy for Insomnia. And there's one called Rest Ed as well. And these have been validated. Some of them do have costs. It's worth looking into, but what these really are kind of different workshops. So they'll have sort of 5 or 6 different sessions. You might keep sleep diaries, and really will offer sort of some tailored tips to help support you, especially if you're having symptoms of insomnia. So that's the getting sleep and staying asleep. And I think if it's, we can recognise that we're in an acute period now where sleep is going to be disruptive, but this can also feed into long-term sleep problems. So I think if you're experiencing sleep problems for longer than a few weeks and you can't get on top of it using your own environment and behaviours, adapting it and just adapting to a new situation, it is worth looking into some of these resources. As I mentioned earlier, we do have some resources on our website, which is www.sleepwake.ac.nz, and you'll see on there's kind of a COVID icon, and we've got information sheets to do with general sleep tips, sleep for young people, sleep for older people, sleep and immunity, sleep for shift workers, and so on. So there's some good tips in there, which I've alluded to today, and a bit more coverage there. Finally, I think just to mention, that we've got those tips there. We've also got our survey, and so this is being launched just last week, over Easter weekend, and because we're seeing anecdotally so many people asking and talking about the changes with sleep with the COVID situation, we've launched a survey to try and document the experiences there. So if you'd like to take part, that is an online survey, and you can also access it from our website. There's a link there. There's questions there about who you are, changes to your routine and lifestyle since the pandemic. Lots of questions about sleep timing and things that are disrupting sleep, as well as how you're feeling. And then within that also there's some areas where you can write more about your experience, which I'm really keen to hear about, because obviously it's not just a tick box, how are you sleeping type thing, but actually, everybody's experience is different. And I think especially for older people, if there's underlying issues which are affecting your sleep, it's really important to document that too. Or if you're supporting other people, or have other ailments that are impacting your sleep, and you've got the COVID pandemic on top, it is a challenging time, and that's fine. And so we're here collecting that data, and I encourage you to take part, and encourage you to look at our resources, and get in touch if there's any other questions. Maybe we can do a follow-up presentation for age concern if it's something that people are interested in. So thank you all for watching my video. I hope this has been useful. It's not quite the same as what I was doing prior to the lockdown, but I think it is a strange situation, and so I will post links on the website or the YouTube with links to the resources, and stay safe. Thank you guys. Bye bye.